Welcome to CU Boulder, Colorado Law School, and the Silicon Flatirons Center. My name is Brad Bernthal. I'm the executive director here at Silicon Flatirons. As many of you who are old friends know, Silicon Flatirons operates within the triangle of technology, law and policy, innovation and entrepreneurship. And in my not so humble estimation, we are as good as, or perhaps the best at CU Boulder in terms of doing public events. And today is a really special one to have our founder emeritus back in the house, who apparently can get everybody to play hooky from work for 2 hours at a time. Congratulations, Phil. In terms of where this event sits, this is a public event that is bolted onto a private set of discussions that involves representatives from over 20 states, Attorney General's office. We've had over 40 individuals from those offices participate. To welcome them to Boulder, could I get all of those who have been involved in the State Center Silicon Flatirons event the last couple of days to please stand up? I didn't realize we cordoned everybody all off on the side here, but that's pretty good. And with that, I'm going to introduce our dean here at Colorado Law School. Please help me welcome Dean Lolita Buckner Inniss. Lolita.
Thank you so much, Brad. It is such a tremendous honor to be here today and to welcome you all. First of all, let me thank and welcome our distinguished guests from the Attorney General's offices from across the United States. We are deeply, deeply honored to have you. And I think more than ever, we understand and value the breadth and the depth of the work that you are doing in this area and in many others. The topics under discussion in the program today are truly vital. Over the past decade, we've witnessed a notable increase in state-level involvement in technology policy regulation, particularly as Congress has yet to enact significant privacy legislation. This shift has propelled regulatory action in two primary directions. Internationally, with regions like the European Union taking the lead in privacy regulation, and for us domestically, individual states have begun stepping up in a major way. Now, to explore this very critical development, it is my distinct pleasure and honor to reintroduce a cherished former leader and faculty member of Colorado Law, Phil Weiser. He really does not need any introduction, so I just have a few brief remarks. I would say first and foremost that Phil, as one of my predecessors, is a really hard act to follow. I even had someone say to me when I started in 2021, "So you the new Phil?" Nobody could ever be the new Phil. As you know, Phil Weiser founded our Silicon Flatirons Center in 2000. He was, of course, later our dean. As some of you may know, he remains a faculty member. So technically, I'm his boss. But that is a really limited technicality. And he now plays a prominent role in our state and in our nation as the Attorney General of Colorado. And so, without further ado, because there is much more I could say, join me in warmly welcoming our esteemed Attorney General, Phil Weiser. Thank you.
It is so meaningful to be here. Lolita, that is a very kind introduction. It is heartwarming on many levels. I want to start with a special story, but first, a question. When people here think about AI, how many people feel scared? Raise your hands. How many people feel excited? Raise your hands. And note, some people raise their hands for both. I was outside and Sarah Snickrind, our Director of Student Programs here, in her wonderful fashion, said, "Phil, I have a student you need to meet." And I love it how some things never change, Sarah. Her name is Sonia Amin. She was in Startup Summer. Sonia told me that she had a startup idea around AI, and what it was helping people journal, and then the AI would help people see their own, and I want to get this word right, disabilities that were biased against themselves. The voices in people's heads that says, you can't do this. An AI opportunity to help people grow through journaling. We're going to see a lot of startups with AI. Colorado has the promise, and I believe will have the reality of being a leader. This is actually Denver AI Week this week. This is also Denver Startup Week this week. And when I think back on things I've done, Sonia, Sarah, Startup Summer is incredibly meaningful because it's getting young people, students, engaged in entrepreneurship, believing they can harness emerging technologies to make life better for people. On Thursday, I'm going to have a fireside chat in Denver Startup Week. That's the topic. How can startups make life better for people? And Sonia, the idea you have for startup is an amazing example. And for those people who want to talk to Sonia afterwards, raise your hand, Sonia, so people know where you are. So thank you, Sonia, for embodying what we aspire to be a part of in this community. And it has been such an honor to be here in a community and watch a journey of this ecosystem. I was seeing Nancy Pierce earlier today, who's been such an icon supporting startups and entrepreneurship. And I remember when I went to you in 2000, talked to you about Silicon Flatirons, and you were in right away. That's how this community works. People say, how can I help? Brad Feld, who's often been on the stage, give first. Many of you also know me as Colorado's Attorney General, and some know that I spent time in our Justice Department in the Antitrust Division working on consumer protection. And now I am taking all those experiences together to take on a really important role serving the people of Colorado. For those of you who can't geek out enough on these topics, on data privacy and artificial intelligence, the good news is we will post my remarks and they will be rich with references to all sorts of legal and regulatory arcana, including what I learned about nanotechnology working for President Obama. And if you want to follow up with me and the team, I welcome that. But I do want to keep my remarks short because one of the most important norms and traditions here at Silicon Flatirons is to make sure students get the first question. And Brad told me students will mostly have to leave at 12:55 for a class. So I'm not going to take too much time. I do want to say what Brad said again, and I want to add one other party. This conference was an interesting innovation because it comes on the heels of a convening of state leaders on data privacy. The number keeps changing, so I'm going to ask Jill and Stevie. 19 states? Jill's saying 19. All right, Jill and Stevie both said 19, so we're good. 19 states have passed data privacy laws. For those keeping score, and we do, we were number 3. And for those who remember the old Avis commercials, I would say, and we try harder. The community of states around this work, it's inspiring. And I will say, and I may come back to this, it's deflating that our national government can't provide federal leadership in this area of data privacy. I worked for President Obama, as I mentioned. I was in the White House on the National Economic Council. We worked on a privacy bill of rights that was ready for prime time in 2012. It's been on the back burner ever since. But we're not waiting for federal leadership in privacy. We are providing it at the state level. And the team that you guys assembled, the State Center, played a great role, and also Princeton University's Center for Information Technology. And this will be a coalition of the willing of states and other academic and civil society institutions helping us improve public policy. And I want to acknowledge here, who's already acknowledged, Emily Myers, and yes, Brad Bernthal, for your leadership and friendship. I want to start a little bit about data privacy, try to say a few words about AI, and mostly I want to leave time for questions. What I want to start with, a true north, is how can we both enable the sort of innovation entrepreneurship that Sonia's interested in doing in the AI world, which obviously uses data, while protecting consumers. And I want to suggest, I believe it's a false dichotomy for those who suggest you could do one or the other. We have to do both. Part of what's important when you get emerging technologies is there's trust that they're not going to be our undoing, that there are going to be protections, there are going to be guardrails, there are going to be people paying attention. It's also important that we don't try to strangle emerging technologies because we say we're afraid of some potential risk which might happen, or we shouldn't put on unnecessary guardrails where there's no plausible scenario that the risk that we're guarding against ever is going to happen. And when we look at the work we did in data privacy, we've got a model in Colorado of doing just that. And I am proud of that model. I want to, again, acknowledge the team that's done that. And in addition to Jill and Stevie, Ann Lee is also here from my office. And Ann has done a great work setting up what we call an impact team. And I want to spend a minute on this because it's important. We in Colorado, both in data privacy and in AI, are not going to say, well, we're going to try to keep a close eye on the private sector, but we can do whatever we want. Instead, we're going to ask the question in our Department of Law, how are we managing our data? Who has access to what data? How long are we storing it? We're going to advise our clients in state government about their obligations and about best practice. And yes, we're going to oversee the private sector. And having all those individuals talk to one another leads to better results. The same will be with AI. We're going to use AI. And for those lawyers out there who are saying, maybe we can have law practice be unaffected by AI, I guess I rest my case. You can remember, by the way, some of us, the days when lawyers said, we're not going to use email to provide legal advice. Or even worse yet, when I was in law school, we're not going to use electronic databases for research. I was in law school and they made us learn the shepherds, which is looking for old cases, literally using the books that they used. Even though Westlaw and Lexis was around, which they taught us afterwards because they thought it might be a passing fad. So that was a waste of time. And while we're talking about great innovations, Brad can tell you later about Mike Boucher, a Silicon Flatirons alum who never graduated law school because while he was here in this program, he got a great idea for a startup company and dropped out. So on the work that we're doing on privacy, it's been a very intensive and meaningful project. Part of what we've done is have an inclusive and engaged stakeholder conversation. And this is something that we would recommend to all states who are looking as to how to do this. We felt a special burden here because we advise other state agencies about how to do rulemaking. And for those of you who know FCC rulemaking, just remember that is a poster child in how not to do rulemaking. We've had those conversations at Silicon Flatirons. The short answer is the ex parte process in FTC rulemaking does not mean you can't talk to anybody about the regulations. It means that's where all the action is when the rules actually get made. It's not a healthy habit. Maybe they're getting better. I've not been as closely attuned, but back in the day, that was the norm. For us, we did all our work in public. We released the full set of rules. We got comment on them, and then we released the full set of rules again, made some minor modifications, but we were very much committed to that ongoing improvement, getting more ideas. It's a part of what we think good government looks like. As we look at how we do enforcement, because now we're getting to that phase, we're very much focused on how we educate businesses about their obligations under our data privacy law. This is a core part of what we have to do, and there's even a cure period where businesses have a right to show that they made an honest mistake. I've often used the basketball metaphor here. We're not going after ticky-tack fouls. However, flagrant fouls, game on, we're going to address them. As promised, a word about artificial intelligence. There's a lot that can be said about AI. One of that is Colorado has passed a law focused on discrimination in artificial intelligence. And our true north, again, is this point about what are the benefits that can come from AI, what are the harms, and how do we think about the role of regulatory framework allowing the benefits while keeping an eye where is there harm that we can prevent or at least greatly minimize. This is important work, and we'd be making a mistake if we didn't acknowledge both those 2 points. You've got to start from that and have honest conversations. There's actually a task force now to refine the law that was enacted. And there's also an opportunity for what we're calling pre-rulemaking informal conversations, which is why Ann Lee gave me, before I got here, this card with a really nice QR code, which takes you to a new page on our website about our AI conversation. And what we did, consistent with our commitment to transparency and engagement, is we put up there, here's what we're thinking about. It's a document about considerations for us to evaluate. Bless you. Some of those considerations may end up being relevant to this legislative conversation I mentioned through a task force that we're represented on, others for our work down the road on rulemaking. The important point here is in Colorado, we do this work together. And we do it in a way that we make sure everyone's heard from, and we do it with a rigor to get these rules the best we can, always bringing a regulatory humility. Is there something we're missing or not seeing? We recognize that there's a risk sometimes that larger companies will have a larger voice and that we may miss the concerns and impact on smaller companies. And that's something we want to make sure we're sensitive to. In short, there's a lot at stake here as we enter into what is a technologically advanced age where one economist article said it, data is the new oil. It's really valuable. And AI is going to be the new, pick your metaphor here, automobile that uses that data in all sorts of ways, some of which will be tremendously valuable to people, Sonia's startup company idea. Others can be downright scary and dangerous. This is critical work, and I have to say we're so fortunate in Colorado, and I know other states, to have such tremendous public servants willing to do it. Can you give all of them a round of applause? All right, as per our norm, a student gets the first question, and I'll ask Brad to call on the right student if no one raises their hand.
I wanted to ask about Colorado's suit against Meta, which is proceeding. I mean, maybe that's not even high tech enough at this point, but which is proceeding on the basis that Meta is a publisher. How have the most recent Supreme Court decisions in net choice affected the exemptions, I think under Section 230, that those companies have enjoyed up until now? And what's your take on it? Are they a publisher?
All right, so first, Lauren, can you raise your hand? Lauren oversees our consumer fraud section. You can find her afterwards. Adam's a good example of what I said, which is you live your life as you live your life, and it's never too late to go to law school. I say it all the time. And what year are you now? That's what I thought. Not a lot of 1Ls just started know about Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. But here I am getting the question, and the interesting answer is, honestly, you can read our briefs because this issue has been briefed. It's before the judge. The judge has made a prior ruling on this. And for those who haven't heard about this law, Section 230, it provides a immunity when an online platform is what I'll call it neutral. Just Craigslist says you can list your places to live and you don't do anything. Meta is not a neutral actor without any thumb on the scale. I want to leave you on this case with an important, haunting fact or two. Young girls are twice as likely to see self-harm content as other people are. So something's happening there that Meta is doing. We would submit that is not being a mere passive, hey, we're not doing anything here. No, you're doing something. How about those notifications that come all hours of the night? That's doing something that's preventing your kids from sleeping. And by the way, how about telling people this is not a threat to your mental health? And for parents and kids who've been told that about social media, it was quite an awakening to see a whistleblower before Congress, Frances Haugen, release information from Meta's own files, its own research that said the opposite of what they're saying publicly. That is deception. And finally, marketing to kids under 13 because it's good for your business model without parents knowing about it is a violation of federal law. We're enforcing that too. All right, second student, before we go to others. Come on. There we go. Yes.
Thank you. So I have a question about Chevron. So since the Supreme Court essentially got rid of it, how is that going to play out in states? On a state level, specifically for these state agencies.
Three answers to a very important question. First, that decision, I believe, is wrong and problematic and has created a lot of mischief. For those of you here who are in Robin's class, where's Robin? Right back there. She'll tell you about it this afternoon. Number two, I'm actually giving a talk on that in a couple weeks at the CU Anschutz campus. We'll post the remarks. You can read them. You don't have to go. And finally, and importantly, as a matter of state law and our state's law, the Loper-Bright decision that overruled Chevron doesn't affect us in a formal way. Now, informally, it's possible that some state Supreme Courts will look at it in what gets called by lawyers persuasive authority. But I have this to say. That decision, Loper-Bright, I find entirely unpersuasive. And so I am confident that our Supreme Court will continue to provide agency deference. And so as we do good work in our AG's office on regulations about data privacy, I am not concerned that we will lose the deference we've historically gotten in state court. Thank you. All right, Michelle, and let's go back to Ken after that.
So I get a notification from a business that I have had dealings with at least once a week that says my data has been leaked. And when I speak to these companies, they insist that the onus is on me to protect my data. But I do all I can, and still we have ourselves, we're just humble, normal, workaday people with no real, tempting targets. So how do we balance the restriction of data access with a normal, stress-free life? How can we do that?
Michelle, thank you. That is a very important point. It speaks to a question I got earlier, which is why have I made data protection and these issues such a high priority? Because it matters to so many Coloradans who are experiencing just what you're experiencing. And I'm gonna give you the honest answer. You can't live that stress-free life. The cat is out of the bag, to use that metaphor. All of our data is all over the dark web. There's all sorts of actors who've got access to it. Early in my term, we sued Equifax. That data breach alone was devastating to most Americans, and so on and so on and so on. Here's what this means. And I heard about this from two separate people this week. The following scam, and I told Lauren and she was aghast. Personal information for you. I know this is where you live. I know this about you. Here's a picture of your house. I've got naked pictures of you. If you don't send me cryptocurrency, I'm gonna release them. There's that attitude. But other people have a different response. And unfortunately, some of the responses are sending the money. Some of the responses are spending a whole day that's ruined calling the police and being afraid. Which means what we have to do in our department is help people build the best data hygiene habits you can. And this includes, by the way, your passwords that have also been hacked and leaked. It helps you stay vigilant all the time because someone's going to try, you've heard this phrase, phishing. They're going to use what they know about you to get you to do other things, often give them money. And you've got to stay on your toes. So unfortunately, we're living in a compromised world. Now, we will try to prevent things from getting worse. And this is why our data privacy law plays a super important role here. Businesses got to get this memo. Stop collecting so much data. If you don't need a social security number, don't ask for it. Stop storing it for so long. Stop giving so many people access to it. All that makes a difference, and we're in the process of making that culture change. Ken had a question.
Hey, Phil. I have an easy one for you. So Not, as you know. So here's my big question. So we're trying to come up with new regulations around, balanced new regulations around both privacy and AI and privacy in AI, which just compounds things, so that they're relatively non-impactful on entrepreneurship. This requires the rules that we implement to be easy to comply with, which is a combination of clarity and a straightforward path in a world where, especially in the AI world, the state of the art's changing daily. So what's that even look like? What's that regulatory framework look like?
First, I didn't say this before, so I should say it now. coag.gov/AI is where you want to go to read the speech, read the considerations document, be able to advance, can go on with this conversation. And I am haunted by this question. The corollary point is, if technology is moving so fast and regulation moves at a different pace, what gives? And I think I start with just the humility and the awareness that technological change is accelerating and regulatory processes do take more time. What I do believe is be careful about any prescriptive requirements either in law or regulation, because they may become not just outdated, but counterproductive. And so I tend to preach, and our team tends to preach, what we call a principle-based approach that keeps us more focused on an enduring principle, less on one specific prescriptive way you might implement a principle that is not going to allow for that one specific approach 3 months from now, maybe, let alone 3 years from now. This is really hard, and I will say the state of Colorado as a whole is focused on how do we continue to use AI and new technologies, knowing that some of the biggest harms that AI can occasion to society will come from government using it in ways that aren't thoughtful. And we're really fortunate to have such leaders. I think Dahlia Rifko is here with us here, and I think Judd Carey right next to Dahlia. It's a pretty special situation in Colorado, like these other states, that we've gotten such incredibly talented people who are so tech savvy to answer these questions, because the alternative doesn't exist. For those who basically want to pretend the AI revolution isn't really coming, or it's not going to affect law, or it's not going to affect fighting wildfires or addressing depression, you're missing a lot. And for those who want to say, oh, there's nothing to worry about here, let's put the nuclear missiles on AI, you're out of your mind. And you haven't watched War Games, which, by the way, everyone needs to rewatch as one of the best movies. So we're not going to be bored. We're going to have a lot of work to do. It's important that we do it together. Please be a part of this work. Thank you all so much for joining us.